Oh, he has.
Okay, recordings in progress. It's gone to the cloud. Hare Krishna. Anyway, so welcome everyone. Hare Krishna. Thank you for everyone who joined yesterday. We had a nice discussion. And I did a little summary of what we spoke about. You'll see there if you want to have it on the YouTube. We put the recording up there so you can see that there. And again, if you have any more questions on the subjects we discussed yesterday, it all started with Mother Lwanga Latika asking about peanut butter. Whole discussion about peanut butter. And
yeah, but you know, peanut butter. Today was Jayananda Prabhu's appearance day or disappearance day.
so, yeah, I heard that as well.
His favorite food. His favorite food was peanut butter halva.
Yeah, I thought that this morning when I heard that wonderful class Doimore gave him peanut butter halva. So therefore, it's completely bona fide.
I heard it with
peanut butter halva.
Yeah, I heard it from Vrindavan, Dinabandhu Prabhu.
Okay.
He was saying the same thing, peanut butter. They were distributing peanut butter halwa in Vrindavan today.
Shame we can't make it for the deities, but anyway. So
yeah, I made it at home here. Actually, it was really good. Peanut butter halva is, good.
Sounds great. Hare Krishna. All right, so welcome again, everyone. Hare Krishna. We're on third chapter, right at the end. Yesterday we got to text 41. We have there's 43 slokas in chapter 3. So let's see if we finish today. So let me share my screen. That's what I was going to do next. So we got 10 devotees with us at the moment. Thank you for being with us. And let me share my screen. Looks like I always need to share my screen. Isn't it? It's a bit easier if I don't. I've got more room on my laptop here, but it's not a problem. I can work around it. Okay, what can you see? You can see surrender unto me, yeah? I'll just check.
We see your screen.
Yeah, I see my screen. Okay, 41 we did yesterday. So we begin at 42. Okay, so hands are raised for reading. After we pray to Prabhupada, let's dive straight in. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vastaya Bhutale Jai Mati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachalini Nivasesha Sunyavari Pashtatara Satanini Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. And just a reminder, we seem to be using it more in these sessions on Bhagavad Gita, but you can use the chat as well if you like to ask questions there. You're quite welcome to do that, as well as unmuting. Hare Krishna. So let's begin then with Mother Rajkishore. You can take us away and let's see what adventure we're going to go on today. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Text 42. Indriyani parani ahur indriyebhya param manaha manastastu para buddhir yo buddhe paratastu sa. Translation. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind. And he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. Purport. The senses are different outlets for the activities of lust. Lust is reserved within the body, but it is given vent through the senses. Therefore, the senses are superior to the body as a whole. These outlets are not in use when there is a superior consciousness or Krishna consciousness. In Krishna consciousness, the soul makes direct connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the hierarchy of bodily functions, as described here, ultimately ends in the Supreme Soul. Bodily action means the functions of the senses, and stopping the senses means stopping all bodily actions. But since the mind is active, then even though the body may be silent and at rest, the mind will act, as it does during the dreaming. But above the mind is a determination of intelligence. And above the intelligence is a soul proper. If therefore the soul is directly engaged with the Supreme, naturally all other subordinates, namely the intelligence, mind, and senses, will be automatically engaged. In the Katha Upanishad, there is a similar passage in which it is said that the object of sense gratification are superior to the senses, and the mind is superior to the sense objects. If therefore the mind is directly engaged in the service of the Lord constantly, then there is no chance that the senses will become engaged in other ways. This mental attitude has already been explained. Param drashtva nivartante. If the mind is engaged in transcendental service of the Lord, there is no chance of it being engaged in lower propensities. In the Katha Upanishad, the soul has been described as Mahan, the great. Therefore, the soul is above all, namely the sense objects, the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. Therefore, directly understanding the constitutional position of the soul is a solution of the whole problem. With intelligence, one has to seek out the constitutional position of the soul and then engage mind always in Krishna consciousness. That solves the whole problem. A neophyte spiritualist is generally advised to keep aloof from the object of the senses. But aside from that, one has to strengthen the mind by use of intelligence. If by intelligence one engages one's mind in Krishna consciousness by complete surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then automatically the mind becomes stronger. And even though the senses are very strong, like serpents, they will be no more effective than the serpents with broken fangs. But even though the soul is the master of intelligence and mind, and the senses also, still, unless it is strengthened by the association with Krishna in Krishna consciousness, there is every chance of falling down due to agitated mind.
Hare Krishna, thank you. Okay, so any specific immediate questions or reflections on this? Just scroll down to the verse again. Scroll up to the verse. We could say it's a good job that there is something other than the mind and the senses, mind and intelligence, and that's the soul. So at the end of the day, it seems like, as Arjuna was explaining, that one is engaged by force, but actually we do have a choice. And the more we're focused on Krishna, the more we'll be able to act in such a way. Yeah, we'll be acting a correct way because we're the soul. Yeah, we are not the senses, we are not the intelligence, we are not the mind. So Krishna is really being implored, he's imploring us here. And the next verse is more emphatic on this point. Yeah, so there's a hierarchy being described here. So it's often described that the mind is the king of the senses. But who's going to engage the mind? That's the soul. Yeah. So if we can have the spiritual intelligence or the spiritual wherefromness and the spiritual inspiration, then we can direct the mind. Yes. And therefore direct intelligence, which will direct the intelligence, which will direct the mind and the senses. Yes, there's something else here. Any other comments on this?
It's like a serpent, a serpent with a broken fang. So it looks like a serpent. The senses will look like a serpent because the fangs are broken. The senses will not be our master. It will be our servant.
Yeah. So the complete, thank you. Is that in the purple there? Prabhupada speaks about that. No, it's
It just says serpents with broken fangs.
yeah, serpents with broken fangs. Yeah. So the senses are still there, but because Prabhupada brings up this param drishta vartate, that's the actual breaking of the fangs. You know, one gets a higher sense of peace and happiness from engaging in Krishna consciousness. So therefore, the senses may cry for material engagement, but because of this broken fangs, the param drishta vartate, one is more inclined to engage directly in hearing and chanting about Krishna. Yes. Okay, let's, if there's no other questions or comments on this, we can go on. It doesn't have to be. We can go on to the last verse in this chapter. Now, just these two verses, I'm reading this really interesting book by Chaitanya Chiranpuru. Brilliant way he's describing some of, helping us to understand some of these verses here. He describes at text 41 and 42, which I mentioned yesterday. Krishna is emphasizing outer regulation. Yeah, so keep a safe distance from the sense objects to avoid unhealthy indulgence and unnecessary temptation. Also, earlier on in the second chapter, Krishna describes keep all abominable activities far distant by devotional service. So keep ourselves busy in the service of the Lord. Now, this verse 43 is Krishna's encouraging us to use our intelligence to remember our spiritual identity. Yeah, and therefore strive not for material things, but strive for Krishna, understanding our spiritual identity. Okay, so Mother Gaia, I see your hand there. You can read text 43.
Sure, 1 second, let me find it. 343.
It's on the.
Yeah, I prefer to look at mine. Evam buddhe param buddhva samsthyatmanam atmana jahi shatru mahabaho kamarupam durasadam. Translation. Thus knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind and intelligence. O mighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus, by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. Purport. This third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is conclusively directive to Krishna consciousness by knowing oneself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, without considering impersonal voidness the ultimate end. In the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Desire for overlording and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul, but by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and the intelligence. One may not give up work and prescribed duties all of a sudden, but by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses and the mind, by steady intelligence directed toward one's pure identity. This is the sum total of this chapter. In the immature stage of material existence, philosophical speculations and artificial attempts to control the senses by the so-called practice of yogic postures can never help a man toward spiritual life. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports to the third chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of karma yoga, or the discharge of one's prescribed duty in Krishna consciousness.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So this is the ultimate instruction from Krishna. So remember, he's addressing Arjuna's question. What is it that impels one to act against their own well-being? So Krishna describes it is lust, karma esha, krodha esha. So it's transcendental knowledge which is going to give us the strength to overcome this enemy of lust. So identifying ourselves as a soul. So once we identify ourselves as a soul, then our goal, we can direct ourselves away from material sense gratification. Yeah, I think described here. We need to intelligently situate ourselves in our spiritual identity and therein relish non-material fulfillment. No, let me read it. And therein relish non-material fulfillment, so spiritual fulfillment. To relish such joy, we need to ultimately direct our love towards the all-attractive divinity, Krishna. Yeah, so Krishna is encouraging us. Yeah. He keeps reminding us that the soul is above all of this, and the soul is part and parcel of Krishna. So we should not succumb to the lower nature, our lower nature. All right, any questions or comments here?
Yeah, it's nice that they're saying it's not enough to identify yourself as a soul as opposed to body, but ultimately we should also realize we're servants, because the soul level is jnana, and we're supposed to move on to bhakti eventually, hopefully.
Yeah, very good point. And Krishna will bring that out more later. He just gives a hint here at the moment, but later on he will develop the whole subject of devotion, being devoted to him. Yeah, and very good point. There's many stories of Gyanis who fall prey to their material conditioning without being engaged in any specific service towards the soul of all souls, Krishna. Yeah, well spotted. Yeah, in the immature stage of material existence, philosophical speculations and artificial attempts to control the senses or so-called yoga postures can never help a man towards spiritual life. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. Okay. So are we ready to go into chapter 4? Okay, let's go into chapter 4. Now, just a few notes here before we go into chapter 4. Again, I was reading, very interesting. That chapter 4 is entitled Transcendental Knowledge. So chapter 3 ends by describing how to conquer the enemy of lust. So there's and so the 4th chapter, it goes from being a psychological discussion to cosmological. When we see Krishna speaks about his janma, his so-called janma and karma, his appearance and activities. So what's the actual link between this chapter 4 and chapter 3? Well, it's mentioned that transcendental knowledge has been mentioned at the end there as the means to overcome our lower nature, the lower propensities. That is transcendental knowledge. So then Krishna is now, in the beginning, he speaks about the history and the authenticity of this knowledge that he is giving Arjuna. So he will describe in the first few verses about the source, about the parampara, that this knowledge of transcendence, which can assist us to overcome our lower nature and direct us towards our spiritual identity, this is practiced and being given going back thousands of years. So it's given authenticity to the instructions given at the end of the 3rd chapter. So therefore we have the 4th chapter, Transcendental Knowledge. So Chaitanya Charan, he gives, interestingly, he says we have from the psychological discussion to the cosmological. Yeah. So what's the connection? So that's the connection. Yeah. The history and the how transcendental knowledge descends and its source. Yeah. Okay. We're all clear on that, where we're going now. We're entering to the 4th chapter. So I'll ask Dhananjaya Prabhu, I can see you have your hand there. You can read if you like, text 1 of chapter 4.
Yes.
Let me check the chat. I haven't been checking it, if there's anything. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, Prabhuji. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavanaham Avyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manorikshava Kave Bravit. The personality of Godhead Lord Krishna said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivaswan, and Vivaswan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed to Ikshvaku. Purport. Herein we find the history of Bhagavad Gita traced from a remote time when it was delivered to the royal order of all planets, beginning from the sun planet. The kings of all planets are especially meant for the protection of inhabitants, and therefore the royal order should understand the science of Bhagavad Gita in order to be able to rule the citizens and protect them from material bondage to lust. Human life is meant for cultivation of spiritual knowledge in eternal relationship with Supreme Personality of Godhead, and executive heads of all states and all planets are obliged to impart this lesson to the citizens by education, culture, and devotion. In other words, the executive heads of all states are intended to spread the science of Krishna consciousness so that the people may take advantage of this great science and pursue a successful path, utilizing the opportunity of the human form of life. In this millennium, the sun god is known as Vivaswan, the king of the sun, which is the origin of all planets within the solar system. In Brahma Samhita, it is stated, Yat chakshuresha savita sakala grahanam raja samasta shura mutir ashesha teja yasyadnya yasya jnana brahmati sambrata kala chakro govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. Let me worship, Lord Brahma said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, Krishna, who is the original person and under whose order the sun, which is the king of all planets, is assuming immense power and heat. The sun represents the eye of the Lord and traverses its orbit in the obedience to his order. The sun is the king of all planets, and sun god, at present of the name Vivaswan, rules the sun planet, which is controlling all other planets by supplying heat and light. He is rotating under the order of Krishna, and Lord Krishna originally made Vivaswan his first disciple to understand the science of Bhagavad Gita. Gita is not, therefore, a speculative treatise for the insignificant mundane scholar, but is a standard book of knowledge coming down from time immemorial. In Mahabharata, Santi Parva 348.51-52, we can trace out the history of Gita as follows. Treta Yugadau Chatato Vivaswan Manave Dadau Manushcha Lokabhriti Artham Suta Yekshva Kave Dadau Ikshva Kuna Chatat Kathito Vyapan Lokan Avasthita. In the beginning of the millennium known as Treta Yuga, this science of relationship with the Supreme was delivered by Vivaswan to Manu. Manu, being the father of mankind, gave it to his son Maharaja Ikshvaku, the king of this earth planet, and forefather of Raghu dynasty, in which Lord Ramchandra appeared. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita existed in human society from time of Maharaj Ikshvaku. At the present moment, we have just passed through 5,000 years of Kali Yuga, which lasts 432,000 years. Before this, there was Dwapar Yuga, 8 lakh years. And before that, there was Treta Yuga, 12 lakh years. Thus, some 20 lakh years ago, Manu spoke the Bhagavad Gita
2,500,000. Yeah. Go on. Carry on.
Sorry.
Yeah, carry on.
Manu spoke the Bhagavad Gita to his disciple and son Maharaj Ikshvaku, the king of this planet Earth. The age of the current Manu is calculated to last some
305,300,000. No, how was that number? 305,300,000.
305,300,000 years,
Yeah.
of which 120,400,000 have passed. Accepting that before the birth of Manu, the Gita was spoken by Lord to his disciple sun god Vivaswan. A rough estimate is that Gita was spoken at least 120,400,000 years ago. And in human society, it has been extant for 2 million years. It was re-spoken by Lord again to Arjun about 5,000 years ago. That is the rough estimate of history of Gita. According to the Gita itself and according to the version of the speaker, Lord Shri Krishna, it was spoken to sun god Vivaswan because he is also a Kshatriya and is the father of all Kshatriyas who are descendants of the sun god, or Surya Vamsha Kshatriyas. Because Bhagavad Gita is as good as Vedas being spoken by Supreme Personality Godhead, this knowledge is apaurushya, superhuman. Since the Vedic instructions are accepted as they are without human interpretation, the Gita must therefore be accepted without mundane interpretation. The mundane wranglers may speculate on the Gita in their own ways, but that is not Bhagavad Gita as it is. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita has to be accepted as it is from the disciplic succession, and it is described herein that Lord spoke to the sun god, and the sun god spoke this to Manu, and the Manu spoke to his son Ishvaku.
Ishvaku, thank you. Very nice reading. Quite a lengthy purport. Hare Krishna. I just want to reiterate again the connection. I just read it. Actually, I was paraphrasing it before. Why is Krishna is not changing the subject from, he's just expanding on chapter 3. In other words, he's expanding our understanding of the scope of the subject. The inner enemy of lust has been tormenting humanity since time immemorial, and Krishna has been equipping humanity to combat it since time immemorial. Lust deludes us by covering our knowledge of who we actually are. How can we stop lust from afflicting us with such spiritual amnesia? By individual and collective endeavor, how can we fight lust individually? Is described in the last section of the Gita, its 3rd chapter. Hence its focus on the inner world. Okay, it's a bit of a side point there, but just to re-emphasize that point. So this is, Krishna has been giving this science since time immemorial. And here some of the history is now being given. Any questions that come from here? Quite a lengthy purport. And yes, go on, Mother. Yes.
I have a question. I wanted to ask, why did Dvapara Yuga and Treta Yuga swapped?
Oh, here is, where is that?
No, I mean in general, because this is what I was in a Bhakti Vaibhava in the first part, in the first 9 chapters, it said that the Dvapara Yuga and the Treta Yuga swapped, but that Kali Yuga can come faster, or something like that.
I don't know if you're studying that Bhakti Vaibhava, perhaps so you can explain to us. Normally, as we know, it's Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali. But I have heard that before, what you're explaining. Now, the details about it, I can't tell you unless someone else here knows of that. But the general, what Prabhupada would explain is, and as we read more often, is Satya, Treta, Dwapara, Kali. But sometimes you see in Sastra, is it Treta and Dwapara are changed. Why? I'm sure there's a reason, but I don't know that reason without studying it. So perhaps you could study it in your Bhakti Vaibhava Mother, and you can come back to us and explain. Did they give an answer? Or did they explain it?
Yeah.
Or just...
Okay, I'll Krishna.
Yeah, you could find out. It'll be interesting. I did hear it some time ago, but I can't recall the details now.
You gave me a task, so I will look
Yes.
into it.
Yeah, you'll find it should be interesting. You can show the answers there. You can ask your teachers. Bhakti Vaibhava. Yeah, so quite some detail here. And the Prabhupada, as he often does, because the title of the Bhagavad Gita is Bhagavad Gita as it is. So without trying to get some different meaning from the Bhagavad Gita, which most interpretations do. And sometimes Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita then, and probably even now to some degree, would be criticized by different so-called Sanskrit scholars or different spiritual traditions. Or Prabhupada would sometimes translate words in Gita. Or there's one scholar, for instance, just paraphrasing, he approaches, like most people, the Gita is like an encyclopedia of different practices. You can go to the Gita and learn about Karma Yoga. You can go to the Gita and learn about Ashtanga Yoga. You can go to the Gita and learn about Buddha Yoga. But actually, Gita is one specific message. It's a conversation by Krishna to Arjuna to bring him to the ultimate point of bhakti. So all is meant to attract these different practitioners. It's not an encyclopedia of different yogas. Krishna has a specific purpose. So once we could say mundane scholar, he wasn't a devotee or is not a devotee. He was describing here, Swami, he said, Swami Srila Prabhupada sees, Swami Srila Prabhupada seems to see bhakti everywhere in the Bhagavad Gita. Whereas here in this verse, bhakti is not mentioned at all. But here, Swami Prabhupada gives the translation and explains it in reference to bhakti. Yeah. So in other words, Prabhupada is keeping us on track through Prabhupada's translations and his purports. He's keeping us on track of the actual message that Krishna is imparting to Arjuna. Yeah. And he's attracting different followers of different disciplines and reminding them that they can only be successful if to that degree there is a practice of bhakti in their tradition. There is some aspect of devotion to the Supreme, and only then can they be successful in their specific practices. Nothing works ultimately for the ultimate goal without bhakti. So Prabhupada makes this point throughout the Bhagavad Gita, and that's the theme of the Bhagavad Gita as it is. So that and the proof can be seen to the efficiency of the Bhagavad Gita and how many devotees it has made and is continuing to make. How many persons, by reading Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, get the message. Yeah, some of you might have read Bhagavad Gita before, different editions, different translations, and it's probably not likely you're going to seek out a Krishna temple or get the message that I should engage in Krishna's service. Yeah, so Prabhupada, that was his mission. And I think to a large extent he was still successful, although there is many other editions of the Gita still out there, and there is different spiritual traditions and different scholars who will give, you could probably call it, screw out that different meaning. Yeah. So sometimes persons will have their own philosophy. So in order to give substance to their philosophy, they try and wrangle or they try and interpret Bhagavad Gita in such a way that it proves their specific philosophical path, rather than just hear the message as it is. So Prabhupada makes that point. I think makes that point at the end. These mundane wranglers may speculate on the Gita in their own ways, but that is not Bhagavad Gita as it is. So Arjuna is teaching us how to accept the Gita. Yeah. Arjuna is the perfect student of the Gita. So in that regard, we should follow Arjuna's conclusion. Because as a perfect student, then he surrenders to Krishna. So that should be our conclusion at the end of the Bhagavad Gita. Or it can come before that as well. All right. Any other questions here? Bit of the history of the Bhagavad Gita, bit of the history of the cosmos, and how Bhagavad Gita was received. Now that it won't be the actual teachings, the transcendental knowledge is received, is given to the sun god, for example. Yeah. It's not exactly word for word as far as I understand, but Bhagavad Gita is the essence of transcendental knowledge, and that transcendental knowledge has been given to the sun god, and therefore Manu as well. His son Ishvaku, Manu's son Ishvaku, because then they impart that to the people in general to keep people on the path of Dharma. Yeah. So I don't think when Prince Charles gets crowned this weekend, he's going to give a discourse on Bhagavad Gita. Probably highly unlikely. He's probably never even heard of it. So that's quite a problem, where you got leaders who are not even aware of transcendental knowledge, or not even care to give it a thought, unfortunately. So I did hear the Queen read Bhagavad Gita. The Queen did get Bhagavad Gita, and she made a comment. Anyone remember that comment? I think it was comment along the lines, if everyone could live like this, the world would be a lot better. The world would be a better place. Yeah, that's there, But anything out there from any questions or observations?
Hare Krishna. I would like to ask, did the Bhagavad Gita come first or a second? Which one is older, the Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam?
Well, they're all in essence, it's all transcendental knowledge. I mean, Srimad Bhagavatam itself goes back it's repeated throughout the universe in different creations. So it goes back, you could say, since time immemorial, Srimad Bhagavatam, because it's the glorification of the Lord. And also Bhagavad Gita as well. It's the same. It's spoken in different millenniums. It's spoken each time when Krishna manifests in Bhoma, when he manifests his pastimes, then Arjuna's there. So I couldn't say exactly which one was first. I could say they've both been present since time immemorial. Yeah, there's no first or second. Although, if you want to look at the history, we see that Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken after the Battle of Kurukshetra, at the onset of Kali Yuga. So if you want to look at it at this particular earth, in this particular age, then you're going to see that, practically speaking, the Gita, if you want, was given first, and then Srimad Bhagavatam, but they wasn't given something new. Yeah, Mavalavangalataka, I think I heard you there. Hare Krishna. Did I hear someone?
No, it was me, Prabhu, because I was reading in the Srimad Bhagavatam that when Vyasadeva, that he compiled and divided the Vedas into 4 categories, and that he was feeling morose. And then Narada Muni came down to him to say, okay, you have to write a book that would only glorify Krishna, because what happened in the previous books, you were concentrating on the religious principles, but if someone misrepresented, it will sound as using a religion as a mean of sense gratification. So that's why I was wondering which one came first, which one came.
Yes, now Srila Vyasadeva, he is a repository. He is the vessel by which that eternal Bhagavatam manifests. Like even there's a verse that describes Srila Vyasadeva may or may not know Bhagavatam. You understand? It's like yogis, they would do that in the previous ages through their meditation and through their purity. They would want, if we want to use the word, they would channel, or they would download sacred scriptures in the universe of their pure heart. So in the same way, Srila Vyasadeva went into meditation, and revelation of Bhagavatam in its essence was manifest in his heart. Bhakti Yoga Manasi. There's a series of verses that describes Srila Vyasadeva's trance, which he was, and then it was revealed to him. Yeah, so in that sense, Bhagavatam is eternal. It gets revealed to different sages at different times in the universe, in different kalpas and different creations. So it manifests. Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu.
No problem. Yeah. It says here is apurushaya. Because Bhagavad Gita is as good as the Vedas, being spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this knowledge is apurushaya, superhuman. So it means that it doesn't have a human source, as though Srila Vyasadeva is far more than the ordinary mortal. He's an incarnation of Krishna. And he's making a point here as well, because some persons will not accept Gita because it's not part of the original Vedas, 4 Vedas. Yeah, that's a whole discussion in of itself. But Prabhupada's making a point here, as other Jiva Goswami also does, that is spoken by the Lord, therefore is considered to be in the same category. Apurushaya, superhuman. Yeah. Okay. Any other curiosities or questions or reflections? Otherwise, we can ease on to text 2. Let me check my notes here.
Hare Krishna, would you just to add on to,
please, yes, Dhananjay. Yeah.
To the point about the commentaries that are available outside, and if you just see the commentary that Srila Prabhupada has provided, one of the most important things that I see, along with the purports, I mean, they give a proper understanding of a verse, but the word by word translation that is provided, after reading that, there are no questions left, there are no doubts. So word by word translation actually separates what is milk and what is water. Makes it very clear.
Yeah. Thank you, Dhananjay. Also, Prabhupada's brilliant layout of Bhagavad Gita, as Dhananjay is saying. You got the verse, then you got word to word, and then you got a purport. Where you look at other Bhagavad Gitas and it's not like that.
Yeah, it's just like the verse and the brief meaning and then their own commentary on that. But there is no word by word translation.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, some of you might look out of curiosity to see a Bhagavad Gita in the shop. You could just look at it and then you can make a comparison. See Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, even its presentation. I mean, the pictures in there and it's done. It's an act of devotion. Yeah, and Prabhupada was very intent upon that, how the quality. Yes. Yeah, Bhagavad Gita as it is. I think when I first picked up from a library, there was other Bhagavad Gitas there, but I was attracted to this one. Yeah, I was attracted to this one. Something. Okay, let's read text 2. So Anupama, you like to read text 2? See your hand up there. Hopefully a lot of us will know this verse and the previous one, especially anyone's done back to Shastri. Okay, she normally takes a few seconds to tune in. Anupama, did I? Okay, you'll have to forfeit. You're speaking and we can't hear you. I'll ask Mother Chandravali to read.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Evam parampara praptam imam rajyasayo vidu sakaline mahatta yoganasta parantapa. Translation. This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. Purport. It's clearly stated that the Gita was especially meant for the saintly kings because they were to execute its purpose in ruling over the citizens. Certainly, Bhagavad Gita was never meant for the demoniac persons who would dissipate its value for no one's benefit and would devise all types of interpretations according to personal whims. As soon as the original purpose was scattered by the motives of the unscrupulous commentators, there arose a need to disciplic succession. 5,000 years ago, it was detected by the Lord himself that the disciplic succession was broken, and therefore he declared that the purpose of Gita appeared to be lost. In the same way, at the present moment also, there are so many editions of Gita, especially in English, but almost all of them are not according to authorized disciplic succession. There are innumerable interpretations rendered by different mundane scholars, but almost all of them do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, although they make a good business on the words of Shri Krishna. This spirit is demoniac because demons do not believe in God, but simply enjoy the property of the Supreme. Since there is a great need of an edition of Gita in English, as it is received by the Parampara, disciplic succession system, an attempt is made herewith to fulfill this great want. Bhagavad Gita, accepted as it is a great boon to humanity. But if it is accepted as the treatise of philosophical speculation, it is simply a waste of time.
Okay, sorry, a bit distracted there. I was looking. I have a book here which has got the different quotes from different scholars criticizing Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. So I was trying to find one of the quotes to read. But any questions or comments on this? Yeah, I'll just read one, for example. One. To make his case, one strategy adopted by Bhaktivedanta is to represent all yogas other than bhakti as inferior. Another strategy lies in representing other yogas as simply techniques climaxing in bhakti. Yeah, so they criticize Prabhupada that offering that. And another one here. The so-called yogis who meditate on something which is not on the Vishnu platform. Yeah. Below is an example of what being with Prabhupada's critic. The so-called yogis, so Prabhupada says here. Let me just get, yeah. It is interesting to compare passages in other translations of the Gita with those of Bhaktivedanta to note the curious and oftentimes the discrepancies. For example, Swami Prabhupada writes, the so-called yogis who meditate on something which is not on the Vishnu platform simply waste their time in a vain search after some phantasmagory. We have to be Krishna conscious, devoted to the personality of Godhead. This is the real aim of yoga. So different mundane scholars, for them, Bhagavad Gita is not about bhakti, it's about different yoga systems. But Prabhupada is very clear. Let's put something here in the chat. Prabhupada, is it safe to assume that different translations of the Gita are based on different mode of the particular author? Is it? I mean, you could say that, that's for sure. The particular, could say bent of mind, but they're not in the dislibic succession. So they're not following the science of knowing the Gita. Yeah. Arjuna knows the Gita and therefore he acts in a devotional way. Yeah. So therefore he's qualified to receive the Gita because, as Krishna says, because he's not envious and because he's a devotee. So that's the prerequisites for actually entering into the mystery of the Gita, to follow in Arjuna's footsteps. You cannot understand it from a non-devotional perspective. That's why in the very beginning, Prabhupada explains, he kind of addresses the non-devotee reader that for them to have a chance to understand the Gita even, they should at least theoretically accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Otherwise, it's not going to make sense. So at least they should, at least if they do not, at least theoretically, at least while studying it, that's the presentation. Then they have a chance of understanding something. And does anyone know the example that Bhaktisiddhanta would give? And Prabhupada would also repeat it. Trying to understand the Gita is just like, without being a devotee of Krishna, is like common example, probably bees and honey.
Oh, right, yeah.
Go on.
Trying to get to the pot of honey with the lid on.
Yeah. And that's why even with ourselves, we can read Bhagavad Gita many times, but then as we read it over the years, we get different insights into it.
Mm-hmm.
As we become more in the same mood as Arjuna, to some degree, then it's mystical. Krishna is pleased to reveal aspects of what he is teaching. Yeah, that's why we can read it again and again and again and get different, more deeper insight. So it's quite a mysterious. It's like a mystery. But to enter into that mystery, we have to become like Arjuna, devoted to Krishna. Yeah.
I was also thinking about just bringing this disciplic succession, bringing it down to our everyday devotional services, like saying the pujari, it's not that you understand disciplic succession by guru, disciple, like that. But when you're doing even services, you should be following the instructions coming, like at Radharana Ishwar, how Prabhupada taught Yamuna, and then like that coming down. So when we're doing service, we should follow the senior devotees there and not speculate, and so that's also like a disciplic succession.
Yeah, that's very interesting point you bring that up, because I was thinking about that. This was a discussion we had recently. It was questions and answers in class that Dear Shanta Maharaj was posing the question or the challenge: why do I need to take initiation? Yeah. So, and as Mother Chandravali is mentioning, one angle on that question is that the whole culture that goes on in the spiritual world is that the juniors will learn from the seniors. They will learn the mood. They cannot, you cannot approach Radha Krishna directly. You have to learn the mood following the footsteps of the gopas or the gopis. And you will become an assistant to one of the eternal associates to Krishna. You will not approach Radha Krishna directly. So that mood is one of submissive inquiry, yeah, of humble service. and submissive inquiry. So that's when you then gain, could gain access, or you get some specific. That's how devotion is taught. So interesting, Chandra, you brought that up, because it's so. In other words, it kind of goes on. It's nicely spotted as well. It goes on within every day within the temple, or even if you're doing devotion service outside. You have to follow. You have to be submissive, and you have to be ready to be instructed, and ready to be corrected, and you have to be ready to have the right mood. Of course, it should be done in a loving spirit, but you cannot gate crash. So that's why if someone is to actually approach Krishna, you have to follow the Panda. You have to follow the path, which is what Arjuna did. Yeah, he Sishashite ham sadi tvam papanam. Now I'm a soul surrender unto you. Please instruct me. But nicely seen, Chandra, very nicely recognized there that that's how things work in Krishna's service. Yeah, you have to be open. You have to be ready to hear. Something just came up here from Anvesh Sandeep. He showed us seeing the Brahmanda in little Krishna's mouth. Does it mean we are all embodied in Krishna and few are yet to realize that they are part of Krishna? Whatever the event happens, Brahmananda, won't it be known as Krishna? We can speculate different versions of Bhagavad Gita and there in this material world to make oneself aligned with Krishna, depending on his or her maturity level. I think you're trying to understand it, but Ishvara Tattva Dineshu, Bilisna was the first and most advanced devotee, sees within everything the soul of all souls, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Consequently, he sees everything in relationship to the Lord and understands that everything is eternally situated within the Lord. So the first part, what you're writing here, Anvesh, is yes. As Madhya Yasoda sees everything within Krishna's mouth, we are situated within the body of Krishna. This is his Virat Rupa. I think if I've understood the point you're making, seeing Brahmanda in little Krishna's mouth, does it mean we are all embodied in Krishna? But at the same time, he remains, as mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, texts 2 and 3, that he remains also outside. And perhaps, and the second part, I couldn't quite grab let me read it again. Oh, whatever happens in Brahmanda, yes, Krishna knows everything. So his consciousness is spread everywhere. Just like we have that ability to some small degree, like we are the soul situated within the heart, and we are situated in the universe of our body, and our consciousness is spread throughout our body. So when you step on the pin, you can feel it. Why? Because your consciousness is spread throughout the universe of your body. Although you, the soul, are situated within the heart region, your consciousness is spread. So consciousness can spread. It's not just situated in one place. So you think Krishna, this universe is his body. His consciousness is spread and is manifest everywhere. It gets quite inconceivable. But so therefore Krishna knows everything that's going on. And he says that as well in Bhagavad Gita. I know everything that's happened in the past, everything happening at present, but me, no one knows. So it's quite amazing. Yeah, Krishna is omnipresent and he's omnipotent. Yes. All right. Anything else on this? As well, we can pause there for today. We did quite well today. Got through a few verses, 2 or 3. That's good as well. Any final comments or questions? Which verse did we finish on? Number 2, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, let's stop there for today. And I hope I wish everyone a wonderful day tomorrow. Tomorrow is the appearance of Lord Nrsimhadev. So hope you have a wonderful time. There'll be big festivities in the temple here. Abhishek, there'll be Harinam, and of course, breaking fast at the disappearance time of Hiranyakashipu. Okay, that's in the evening. Okay, let's stop there. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Bhagavad Gita as it is ki jai.
His
His
grace,
grace will
Prabhu
never
ki
be
jai.
Hey, Hari Bol. Hare
Prabhu,
Krishna,
all
everyone.
glories to you.
Hari Bol. Hari